This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Also wanted to thank our Patreon supporters. If you're a Patreon supporter, you know that there's a lot of information that will aid your investing and trading if you're a Patreon supporter, and there are other access benefits as well. Today's show is focused on a part B of a show that we did about the fact that China actually needs 4 million Teslas. So the number one question that was asked was, where do we get this information, and how can one read about this information as well? And so the answer that we did was, I actually got the information from a Purdue PhD from China who actually does consulting for the Chinese government when it comes to transportation issues. And so he kind of ran through the numbers for us a couple of years ago, and I was kind of skeptical after talking with him based on the type of vehicles China was producing, etc. So if you'd like to track down the information on this, you can go to Reuters in 2017, and MIIT is the ministry in China that sort of heads all that's being done when it comes to electric vehicles, including the decision to bring Tesla aboard. So sort of a chronology of what happened in terms of our experience with this information was that we actually went and had a conversation with a consultant based here in Bethesda, Maryland, and he reviewed the fact that the Chinese were extremely focused on how things were going to be done when it came to EVs over the next 5 to 7 years. If you review the Reuters piece, what it reviews is the fact that as of 2017, China was a 24 million vehicle a year market. As of the planning that they were working on is the fact that their goal was there would be 35 million vehicles sold by 2025. And the objective they had in mind was that after those 25 million or 35 million vehicles were sold in 2025, their goal was to have 1/5 of them be electric vehicles or EVs. So after I heard the comment, I actually didn't even read up on it. I went back and read up on it so that we could answer this question because it was posed so often after our show. And kind of what happened with me is that I met with this PhD consultant to the Chinese government. He threw out the numbers and what the expectations were, and my reaction was, wow, it's nice that you're discussing this. There's no way that China gets to those numbers in any time soon. And the main reason was that it was my feeling that the problem with Chinese vehicles at that time, which was 2017 into 2018, that all the vehicles they were presenting were very short range, 100, 150 miles tops. They were, in some cases, SUVs, they were doing that, but there was no basis to think there was any way they would achieve the numbers that they had in mind. Little did I know that it was this time, it actually took 1 year of negotiation between Tesla and China before it was decided to build this new plant. So the argument I was making about there's no way this will happen, especially without Tesla, was completely blown away. As we've reviewed, the Chinese, in order to get the EV goals that they had in mind, actually spent about $100 billion in several ways. They offered consumers as much as $15,000 per vehicle to incentivize them to transition to electric. They then did incentives to fuel manufacturing within the country, and this spawned 500 different EV manufacturers starting around 2015. The problem that the government of China ran into was basically these Me Too vehicles attempting to copy Tesla technology were not delivering the kind of results that they were hoping to see. hence initiating the negotiations with Tesla 2016 into 2017, and then successfully getting a deal in 2018. And then we saw the factory that was mostly built between 2018 and 2019 by Tesla in Shanghai. So this really illustrates how focused the Chinese are on a very big EV future. We've actually reviewed the fact that there are a whole bunch of incentives that they've placed there to force consumers to bring EV in as a possibility. They've actually gone ahead and instituted rules regarding every other day driving for ICE vehicles. There are taxes associated with ICE vehicles not associated with EVs. There's consumer side incentives to purchase EVs. Yes, they've been playing around up or down with this number as Tesla has entered and been doing well. But there are a lot of consumers, even the wealthiest, that have been forced to sort of rethink their strategy. Now, there are all kinds of data points that are spinning off on Tesla. One of them that I'm still amazed by is the number one destination for the sales of Rolls and Bentleys is actually China. And as we entered COVID, because of obviously the EV component, but more importantly, the biohazard mode of the S and X's resulted in no sales of Bentleys or Rolls in China in March of this year. I don't think that's continued as things have cleared up, but it definitely makes the point that consumers, even the consumers at the high end, were eager to embrace what those biohazard methods might be able to do relative to the health of consumers. So yes, there's plenty of data to support and comments by the Chinese ministry to support their ambitions when it comes to EVs. But I wanted to take time to review this because the number of times we got comments that indicated that, hey, where did you get this? Because nobody else has it. I'm going to take the time to make sure we put an image up so you guys can see where we got the information officially, even though the information we got was somewhat unofficial because it wasn't written down by that ministry. So to review, the structure of movement was initially we want EVs. All buses possible where it's not a huge freezing situation are now electric in China. BYD has been relied upon to provide those buses. BYD has also been relied upon to provide low-end cars, and they're the largest manufacturer of EVs still, but the strongest part of their market position is down in that $15,000 to $20,000 vehicle range, which with EV incentives, Tesla is starting to enter, and BYD's sales are starting to decline. So the question mark is, will Tesla be unseated by either a Chinese or other global manufacturer as they move to their EV goal that China has, which we talked about being 4 million vehicles. At this point, if we look at 2025, the 35 million, a fifth of sales, if you have 35 million, I believe gets us up into that 7 million vehicle zone. So Tesla doesn't even have to get to 50% to get to 4 million. So if things continue down the path they're on, which in theory they could but shouldn't, there's still room for Tesla to do their 4 million vehicles and have other manufacturers deliver 3 or so million vehicles in this mix. So we wanted to kind of review this again because I think it's a pretty massive number. And for me, I would say there are 3 triggers that prompted me to embrace doing this story. The first trigger was I've been watching video of the construction of the new facility in Shanghai. And if you watch that facility closely, the breadth and depth of construction confirms that this is not, the goal here is not 250,000 vehicles a year. The goal is 1 million vehicles to 2 million vehicles a year, and everything is structured for it. Location near the water where you can ship in and out, train access to rail cars in and out. Same thing for raw materials. Everything is set up for at least 1 million vehicle a year facility, if not 2 or 3 million a year facility as you look it over. The second trigger for us to do this show is that there's actually a video out, and I'll include a link, about a place called Shenzhen, China. If you look this up, evidently 30 years ago, there were 300,000 people here in this city. Right now, the population is the combination of New York and greater Los Angeles, or something in the 50 to 60 million people zone. And there are other data points that were articulated in a show that I watched, including the fact that Shenzhen, China now exceeds the amount of venture capital that's being disseminated in the United States. The biggest driver of this is obviously BYD is headquartered here, but there are a large number of other firms that are also headquartered here that are a big part of the EV revolution. So EV and other technology revolution. And so another component of this that was articulated is that the Chinese government is on a massive effort right now to help to make a transition from a mostly rural and agrarian economy into a very technology-centric, etc. economy. At present, they're at about 50% rural, 50% sort of large density or people in the city type of structure, and they still have 25% to go, or something like 250 million people are being transitioned into cities and out of sort of rural settings and those activities. So there's housing needs, obviously there's transportation needs, etc. And combine this with the fact that they have a strong goal to reduce the impact of pollution and the death rates associated. I will say a sidebar note on this that I find strange is that the goal is to reduce pollution and the degree to which there's health issues related to that. What I found interesting about that one, though, is the fact that something like 90% of the men in China smoke. One of the biggest reasons for that is the Chinese government actually controls the cigarette business. And so there are quotas or goals that they have each year for those individuals to how much you're supposed to be buying, and that number has to increase in each year. So I just think it's kind of interesting that they want to make the money from people smoking, and they're wanting to reduce the death rate from pollution that they're trying to reduce with EVs. But I just think that's an interesting point, that they're not making an effort to allow consumers to not engage in smoking if they choose not to. So nonetheless, I want to point out that we're in a situation right now where the government is clearly focused on EVs. They've done a good job of making the transition for Tesla to come over. I think the sign that we're going to get our 4 million for sure is when Elon announces where the second EV plant is going to be in China. It's been interesting to note that Elon actually talked about having more EV locations in China, and the plant in Shanghai has continued to grow. He then made the comment that what they're planning to do is do a switch from a large number of smaller gigafactories into a smaller number of larger ones. From a scale, size, etc., this totally makes sense. And so I just wanted to note that, policy shifts do occur, and they are in this case. So the answer is yes, we have documented proof of what the numbers are that we expect to come out of China from their ministry that controls the whole EV zone. And we're wanting to just, make this our backup show to include kind of what's happening in this space, because it is a very important area, and it really shows how we get to the big numbers. Now, I'd have to say that the other thing that we're looking forward to finding out is BYD is actually doing buses and they're doing trucks. They actually have a bus and a truck plant, I believe, in Carlsbad, California, and they're making and shipping buses throughout the United States and then throughout the world from China. They're being assembled here, but not necessarily built here in the United States. So there's a big push in this regard. We're looking for Tesla delivering all manner of EV vehicles, especially the semi. And there's plenty of support there from places like China in ways that we're not seeing in the United States. But Europe in next year is going to start hitting manufacturers with some very large fines. So the whole EV credit issue that we've been talking about with Tesla could actually become more severe as their sales in Europe increase and manufacturers competing don't find consumers buying their products because they're just not as well structured overall as Tesla is. The other, I guess my final note in this area is the fact that Steve Wesley used to be on the board of Tesla, and he pointed out you really need to be cautious of what the Chinese are up to. And Tesla has left 75% of the patents open, and now that they'll be manufacturing in China, there are ways in which the Chinese are going to be exposed to a broader range of what Tesla is doing, including things like what's going on in the construction of their, they have a special magnet structure that goes into the motors that is sort of new, different. And so the question mark is, how is all this going to play out in terms of the Chinese closing the gap on the Tesla advantage in this area? So we really look forward to seeing how this plays out. But for now, there's a heavy focus on best process possible to ensure that Tesla does well short and long term. And the numbers of vehicles that are out there for them to consume in terms of sales, particularly as they're able to lower prices once they do more domestic production in China, is very, very impressive. So we look forward to your comments on all of this. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. We're under attack by a school of ducks both behind us and flying over us. Usually we get helicopters or trains, so we want to thank the ducks. Wanted to remind you of our health tips for the day. Don't forget 25 leg lifts per leg while you're sitting down with a 5-pound weight. They're only $8 at Walmart if you want to pick those up. We also wanted to encourage you to consider the 5-2 or some other diet when it comes to fasting intermittently as a mental health process. Number 3, don't forget, do not go to bed within 4 hours of eating, at minimum 2 hours to allow the food to digest, because that'll prevent your having issues with acid, and no Tums and everything don't work well because they mask the symptoms. Came from a cancer doc from the University of Louisville we spoke with. Also wanted to encourage you to consider 30 SPF or better. Also want to encourage you to try to maintain the same sleep-wake schedule for a couple of weeks, because your body will develop into a circadian rhythm that is actually in your best interest health-wise. At any rate, I want to thank you again for joining us. We are currently in someplace called the National Harbor in the Washington, D.C. area. Behind me, you'll notice a school of ducks that's here enjoying the beautiful setting we're at, and we're trying to bring them in as part of our background. Directly behind us, you can see something called the Wilson Memorial Bridge, which stretches between Maryland and Virginia, and named after Woodrow Wilson. And we wanted to say again, thank you for joining us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss German, au revoir French, Lehit Hebrew, Choda Hafez Farsi, and Assalamu alaikum Muslim, Hey Do Swedish, Zdravstvuyte hello in Russian, Ni hao ma hello in Chinese. And in Jamaica we say enough respect, walk good to all my friends from Jamaica as well. Have a great day. Bye for now. We look forward to your comments.